a very important story that continues to linger on by the way of Adani-Hindenburg issue. Now, been tracking all the developments from the court of law. We know so far that, court will be hearing Adani-Hindenburg case at some point of time. There have been delays on delays. But what's interesting and important to point out is that the SEBI report is still not out. People don't know, public does not know where the markets regulator, its own investigation into the Adani-Hindenburg case is, whether the investigation is concluded, whether a report has been submitted. All of that is in the grey at this point. So petitioners are begging the courts to start a contempt plea or contempt proceeding against SEBI. Will this be a first time that SEBI would be in docks for contempt of court?
I'm not sure about that, Shweta, but what we do know for sure is that petitioners, including Vishal Tiwari, who's one of the petitioners, have signed a 15-page plea, have written and submitted a 15-page plea to the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to admit a plea against SEBI for contempt of court. And what this really means is that there have been tremendous delays in SEBI submitting its report in any form to the Supreme Court. Of course, the final report, we don't know whether it has still been submitted or not. But
clearly, the petitioners would know if the report has been submitted.
Exactly.
So essentially, we can now be, can be confirmed in one way or the other that there is no final report which has been submitted in the court.
I mean, I don't think we can still confirm that, because the Supreme Court had also in the first week of November said that 8th November is your deadline by which time submit all the evidence, all the reports, all the documentation that you have, and also reasons for delay for Supreme Court to take cognizance of why the delays have happened. Now, perhaps
even if it was submitted in a sealed cover, the petitioners ought to be told, because they're a part of the
So maybe the petitioners know already, Shweta, but there have been delays even before the 8th of November. So maybe it is a plea filed retrospectively against SEBI. So we don't know just as yet whether SEBI has...
My reading of what the petitioners have said in their plea is that there is no conclusion to the report, because we don't know whether SEBI has been able to finalize its investigation and come out with a report. So from what appears
From what it appears, yeah, it seems unlikely that SEBI has submitted its report, but perhaps the plea could also be retrospective is what I'm trying to, hint at. But I think the point being that 17th May is the date when the Supreme Court had ordered SEBI to file its preliminary report, even though it would not have been expected to be a complete report, but whatever progress it had made in its investigation by the 14th of August. And that never happened. And then every 2 weeks, every 1 month, we saw delay after delay after delay after delay. And till now, to our limited understanding, yet the report from SEBI has not yet been submitted. The expert panel that was appointed by Supreme Court to look at any lapses on account of SEBI, and SEBI not being sort of, investigating and not having had access to or not having initiated the right processes to investigate Adani-Hindenburg case, that got concluded and that got completed. But the challenge that SEBI had been facing until recently was that it had no access to the overseas entities and the opaque structures there for it to go outside the shores of India and conduct its investigations on who the final beneficiaries of those opaque structures resident outside of the shores of India were. Now, again, so even if SEBI has not yet been able to go ahead and complete that investigation in whatever form, whatever elements have been completed, and I think there were only 2 which were left, that report should have been submitted by now. And if it has not been submitted, then of course we are expecting the Chief Justice of India, who had sought this explanation from SEBI on why these delays have happened, in fact from all parties involved, would now be concluding its own sort of not investigation, but its own analysis and its own objective sort of assessment of where these delays have been, and some sort of a final conclusion, some sort of a final date for hearing should come through, hopefully very quickly.
All right. And the applicant has also very interestingly asked court to ask the expert committee which was set up to look into the allegations, to also perhaps go through the OCCRP report, which has in a way identified the final beneficiaries of this opaque structure. So the petitioner Vinay Tiwari is also asking court, Vishal Tiwari is also asking court and asking the expert committee to perhaps look into the findings of the OCCRP
Absolutely.
report.
And in addition to that, if I can just read a little quote from that 15-page report, and the quote from, which is signed by Vishal Tiwari, among others, is also raising questions on SEBI's own sort of, ability and its own teeth to go ahead and conclude an inquiry of this nature. So it says, but now the question arises whether the present regulatory authority is efficient enough, or if some changes are required by setting up a new regulatory body with more efficient mechanism, so that in future such damaging incidents may not occur in the share market and the investors' money may be protected. This is part of the 15-page report.
It's very damning on markets regulator, a body that is touted to be one of the biggest players when it comes to regulating markets, people's confidence, their faith in the capital markets, not completing a probe and not relaying whether the probe has been completed, sort of no communication from SEBI so far. I think that is more of a deterrent hindrance to its credibility right now.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And I think it is in everybody's interest. It is in the interest of SEBI, it is in the interest of participants of capital markets, and it is in the interest of India, especially ahead of election seasons, for any sort of conclusion on the ongoing, and it's going to be almost a year. It's, I think the report came out on the 25th of Jan, the Adani-Hindenburg report, and then we saw the OCCRP report, and then we saw the Financial Times sort of expose on the findings, or the sort of, a step up on the investigations already done by the DRI, all of that coming in one calendar year. And we're pretty much reaching the end of that calendar year. We are well beyond the midway mark in November. So it is soon going to be a year, and if it happens to be one entire year with no sort of progress and nothing really to write home about when it came to SEBI's own investigations being conducted in a fair manner, and all sort of resources having been made available to SEBI to go ahead and draw conclusions in its own report and its own finding, then it's obviously a very, very tough year for for faith to be reposed in the regulator.
Absolutely, markets regulator, they're being petitioned and asked to submit its final finding into Adani-Hindenburg case. Remember, there's been a delay of months and months now, with no investigative report in sight and no conclusion on whether there has been a completion of investigation so far.